Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP, where we aim to explore the furthest reaches of the cosmos. And as you may be able to tell from the title, we aim to do just that today, and we are Duna Bound. I made some changes in the last episode, or between the last episode and now. I most notably being I got rid of the Research Bodies mod, which was the one that made it so we weren't aware of any other celestial bodies except for the Mun and Mismus. So as you see here, we don't have the observatory between the R&D building and the tracking station. We no longer have that. So if we go into the tracking station, you can see we can now see all the other planets in KXP. And I really wanted that mod to work, but even with satellites up in the air and direct communication to both those, as you see, I have to Moho and Jewel, it still wouldn't give me their orbits. So I decided to get rid of that because it was just holding us back from our mission of exploration. So today we are going to explore Duna. I think Duna might be the easiest one for us to get to. So what we want to do is we're going to do a series of Duna missions there. Starting off with today's mission, we are going to be sending a spy satellite of sorts. First, we need to tack on the most powerful communication dishes we have at 250 gigameters, and the most powerful solar panels we have that we unlocked during the Around the World Challenge. And so what this satellite is going to do is we're going to load it up with all the materials and all the experiments for the ScanSat mod, and basically we want to get eyes on the ground and see as much as we can the altimetry, the resources, the biomes ideally, and if there's any anomalies, we'd like that too, but unfortunately we don't do the anomalies in today's mission. I've only really done like 2 Duna missions before, one in KXP 1 and one in KXP 2. And both those times it was really over-engineered stuff, so I'm really just kind of eyeballing the craft and what I'm going to need. I'm going to end up over-engineering this one as well. This entire stage could have been avoided entirely, but nonetheless we learn and we can always work towards efficiency later. So we want to make sure that we get all the right experiments on there, and so we have to look through and find each one. The ScanSat mod comes with its own. There's an experiment in stock Kerbal, that's that resource scanner that sits atop the probe. Then these do the biome, I believe. I don't know. We're going to get a lot of information out of this, and we're going to utilize those maps to determine the best place to start our probe launches, or potentially crewed. We're going to start with probes, and then we're going to determine whether or not we want to send Kerbals there or continue on else now that we have the full solar system at our disposal. Right there I threw on some extra communication dishes because I realized we don't need these huge communication dishes to communicate with Duna and what is that, Ike? Yeah, Duna and Ike. So we can utilize the little ones and then take both of the big communication dishes and point them at Kerbin. So now I want to build the middle stage. This is going to be the interplanetary transfer stage, and we only have access to these Mark 1 fuel tanks, so we're going to throw engine plate on there so we can make 4-way symmetry with these tiny little nerve engines. We did have access to a bigger one, but I didn't have the tank size available, and even beyond that, I do like having the extra thrust. When it comes to nuclear engines, it's long burns always, so having more of them gives you a little bit more power for your buck. But anyways, now we are getting all that into the right stages. During one of my tests, I realized I didn't have access to remote tech, so I had to throw on an additional probe core on there. Now, during this test, I realized that the nuclear engines have no gimbal, like no non-firing gimbal to speak of, so we are going to need to add some RCS. And after that last and very successful test, we are going to throw a couple more experiments on there. I realized I had a few more from the ScanSat. That one right there will give us our anomalies, but it requires us to be 2 kilometers above the surface. So I'm not sure if we're going to really be able to utilize that. That may have to be a plane situation, but I'm excited for that anyway, especially now that we have a better understanding of rotors. So now we're going to wrap all of this up in a fairing because I'm very happy with how it came out. But before we say goodbye to it, we are going to have to auto-strut the crap out of it because wiggly rockets are no fun. And I managed to remember before sending it on the launch pad and having to deal with it after the fact. So it's always nice. Those are such huge solar panels. I believe that's from the Near Future Solar mod. I'm not entirely sure. The mod list is in the description below, and one of those mods is Janitor's Closet. Highly recommend, if you have a large mod list, to get Janitor's Closet because it'll tell you which mods are from what if you hover over the rocket part. Anyways, we are taking 4 mainsails and we're putting them on an engine plate so that way we can have a little extra thrust to weight ratio off takeoff, and they are basically the biggest engines we have currently. I do turn their gimbaling down to about 40, 42 because I don't want this thing to be wobbling out of control. And we're going to throw some cameras on here. Even though it's not KXP POV, doesn't mean we can't get some interesting shots. So all that is left to do is throw some launch clamps on here and test it for real, and it performs more than adequately. So we are going to change the mission flag to the Duna Red, provided by the Minimalist Kerbal System flags for every body mod, which should be found on CCAN. And so with a single moon, it just gets the 1 star and the different red colors to indicate the red sands of Duna. So we're going to throw this to kind of decorate our rocket, give it a little bit of decals. I've been playing a lot of RP1 recently to get that ready. So I've been having a lot of fun with the decals. But that's for next episode. Unfortunately, in both these recordings, I was not able to record the sounds of the game. I spent so much time on all these different missions in this series and in others, and unfortunately lost all the audio. So we're just gonna kind of hang out with the music and my narration, and I will make an extra note for that in the following episode. We are gonna go a little fast through the launch. We're going to skip some of the earlier spots. We've been to low Kerbal orbit many a times in this series. But it's always fun to see the initial takeoff. Alright, 81 kilometers above the surface, fairing off. We can deploy our solar panels and communication dishes. We plotted in our maneuver into a remote text flight computer. We're going to have to put on the RCS to turn ourselves towards the target node, excuse me. We let ourselves coast up until we hit our maneuver and fire. And there is just enough fuel in this lifting stage to get ourselves to orbit, so we're actually going to jettison it and decommission it so we don't leave any space trash. And with the camera change and the increase in funds, we have made orbit. Small separatrons, make sure that stays safe. I didn't test that separation and explosion, so it was anyone's guess whether or not it got far enough away. I was risking exploding our engines, but it's a good thing that I had the separatrons. Anyways, and now it's time to make our way out to Duna. We're not in the best transfer window. There are much more optimal ways to get there with using a lot less delta V, a lot less time, but we're just gonna send it and see what kind of interception we can get. So we plot our maneuver to leave Kerbin's sphere of influence, and we see, in the settings you can make it so it'll always show you the closest approach, and I highly recommend that. It's just a great way of being able to truly see what you're looking at instead of having to wait until there actually is an approach, and then it will tell you. So because we had it on, I was able to really eyeball where our interception was going to be, and I'm glad to say that it was actually just that easy. I didn't plot it out. I didn't do any testing to see when the best time was. I didn't do any time warping to get to this exact launch window. So it was this in my test. It was this exact maneuver, basically. Well, this basic maneuver that took us. However, in all the tests, we ended up with a Ike intercept. So unfortunately, we're not going to get that one on this, but we are going to be going to Ike soon enough, so no worries there. So all that's left now is to time warp our way to our maneuver. Nuclear engines are great, highly efficient in a vacuum. You only need liquid fuel, you don't need oxidizer. However, they have a low thrust to weight ratio, and even with 4 of these, it's still going to be a 3.5 minute burn for this. This is why having remote tech is excellent, because I plotted in the maneuver into remote tech, so not only does it start on time, but it actually stops on time as well. So I went up and I refilled my coffee and got myself ready for the approach, and yeah, it was nice to have everything handled at. The downside is you have to have a much more complicated communication system, so there's trade-offs, but ever since I started modding KXP, I almost never go without remote tech. But there we go, our maneuver has been made. We are going to need to make a mid-course correction, or just to make sure that we come in exactly where we want to. We're going to have a nice flyby of the Mun. We actually peek into its sphere of influence ever so slightly. And that beautiful red nebula is from the NGC 3372 skybox. I've tried a lot of them, the different skyboxes, and I've been really liking this one right now. It's been adding a very interesting feel to it. It's kind of like a nebula, kind of not. Typically I use Pood's Calm Nebula. I like it, but the dark blues were... it just paled into comparison to this one right now. At least personally. If you have a better suggestion for a skybox, I'd love to hear it. If you have a favorite or a lesser known skybox, let me know in the comments below. Anyways, now we are just heading off to leave Kerbin's sphere of influence, head out into deep space in orbit of the sun. Flight computer keeps throttling back the time warp because I keep gaining and losing signal, and I forgot to change that setting, and I couldn't remember where to get it while mid-flight. But if you use remote tech, I highly recommend, unless, well, there are certain situations where killing time warp when you regain signal is very useful, but sometimes on long missions like this, it just needlessly kills your time warp, so check the settings if that is a problem. But now we are in orbit of the sun, and our closest approach is only actually 492 kilometers. I just kind of want to note this real fast. I am at a 0.0 inclination to Duna right now. I don't know how that happened. I mean, I'm assuming Duna is on a pretty similar incline to Kerbin, but whether it's 0 or not is anyone's guess. But let's go ahead and bring this closest approach down to 48 kilometers. And we're going to want a polar orbit for this because it's a scan satellite. We're going to need a polar orbit in order to cover every inch of the planet. I forgot to mention early on in the video, like right at the beginning, we took a contract as well to start a communications network around Duna. This is one of the remote tech contracts. And so that's why having those big communication dishes is going to be crucial, because that actually starts us off at around 65% of the 95% necessary coverage. And so once we send our second satellite there, do an equatorial satellite, we should have a pretty decent coverage of communication around Duna. So now I'm lowering the thrust limiter on these engines because I want to make my course correction to bring myself to the appropriate periapsis. I want to make it as long as I can without wasting too much of my time. And 9 seconds of a burn can be pretty accurate. So it's those 2 second, 1 second, 0.5 second burns. That's where you can wind up in trouble. And it almost gets me there. So I just tap ever so slightly on the throttle. And that gets me at about 260. However, we need to be below 250 kilometers in order for all of our scanning to work. Some of it we can go higher, but most of it can be hit at 249 kilometers. 250 is too much for one of them, so I pointed the wrong direction. I needed to point anti-normal instead of normal, so we're about to raise our periapsis, but then we'll just flip around and lower it. And what I'm doing here is I use my pinky and hold down on control, and then I just tap the shift button, because the control will just override once you lift your finger off the shift button and keep the throttle from going up too high. So now instead of using RCS and throwing ourselves all over the place, we're just going to do physics warp and let the move of time push us. Now we are pointed anti-normal. Kill our time warp and just tap on the throttle until we get to a decent height. So 246 kilometers above the surface, and we're going to circularize at our periapsis. It's only going to take us 1200 delta V, and we have 1800. Like I mentioned before, we're going to end up overutilizing our nuclear engines to the point where our liquid fuel engines are pointless. But now we are on the final approach to Duna. We get a chance to see Jewel and Eve, which is nice. It's hopeful that we have an audience, and they too soon enough will be visited, because that is the goal in KXP, is to visit every single celestial body. We want to explore. We have these flags, we want to plant them, and we want to see. I definitely want to send a rover to Duna. I want to do some desert dune buggying. Especially see if we can get ourselves caught in a dust storm or thunderstorms on Eve. This is going to be fun. I'm excited. Having that limitation of research bodies was making it such a grind, and I think by just getting rid of that and going back to a more stock-ish Kerbal, it just inspired me to just light the fire under Gene Kerman and get this mission going. And in the next mission, we're probably going to send one more probe, get another satellite in orbit, but we may send a lander, depending. I think I might just aggressively pursue this Duna program. So now we're changing our inclination to make it more of a straight vertical 90-degree situation. It's okay if we're slightly off, because there can be a little bit of a drift. If you get a perfectly 90-degree orbit with a ScanSat satellite, sometimes you don't get full coverage. It's kind of annoying. You have to make a correction at some point. But this craft over-engineered perfectly to the point where we're actually going to ditch the nuclear engines after we do this maneuver. I don't know why. I just kind of thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, let's just get rid of it. We can use less RCS to turn ourselves around if we need be. We may end up decommissioning the satellite at some point or taking it elsewhere. We might send it over to Ike, but even without the nuclear fuel that we had left, we should still be able to make it there using the liquid fuel and oxidizers we have. So now we press the action group that extended our scan satellites and started the process of gathering information. And by the time we visit here next, we should have several maps of the place, biomes, altimetry, resources, you name it. We may end up having to send more for higher qualities, but I don't know that we've unlocked that technology just yet. And we're going to switch over to the Hullcams VDS for a nice sneak peek of what's to come in our KXP series once we make it here ourselves. In this series, though, we rescued all of our Kerbals from all the moons that they were on, and so we have no problem just time warping our way through and getting these missions done, so I'm excited to keep going in the next episode. But anyways, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider subscribing if you aren't already. Drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.